Hi, everybody. I hope that you are working away on your reading responses. I just want to quickly say before I start this video, sort of giving you a few things to think about in terms of this week two's reading and the lecture notes that you have. Please, when you're doing that reading response, look at the assignment, follow those steps. That's it. The exact sort of format is right there. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, Section 4. That's it. These are like only between 1 and 2 pages long. Just answer sort of those questions and even use headings if you want to. It doesn't really matter to me. But don't make this more complicated than it is. All you need to do is look at the assignment, answer those questions. That's it. You'll have done the assignment exactly as we're supposed to. Um, so, week two, and in your lecture, there's some discussion about bodies, right? And how do we understand bodies and different sort of feminist theoretical approaches to bodies and ways of understanding bodies. And so, rather than I'm not going to go through the lecture, you all can read, but I want to offer a few things again for you to think about in addition, kind of, to what's there in the lecture and the reading that maybe just sort of it helps to flesh out a little bit what the lecture was getting at. Talk about the way that in the lecture we talk about the way that the body is situated, right, and how it's understood, but that the body in sort of the dichotomy body mind or body soul or body spirit. Body is always the thing that is negatively marked, and spirit or mind or soul are positively valued. So in that same sort of binary, we have male and female. And so spirit body, mind body, male half of that is also positively valued or positively marked, and the female is what becomes negatively marked. Female is associated with what is carnal, with sexuality, with the fall from grace, with the body, which is somehow always, all of those are always marked as less than, if not full on negatively, and marked as being like problematic and chaotic and in need of control. Um, and that is, in fact, true for the female body. If we think about female bodily processes like gestation and birthing and menstruation, all of those things also are sought particularly in the Euro West, in ways that are really sort of obvious, um, but in lots of other locations as well through various and sundry rituals. Uh, uh, they're constructed as being in need of control, right, by that which is masculine, by medicine, by all of those things that are positively valued. And I when we think about religion in particular, right, and this idea of the body and the spirit and the carnal and the divine, what we end up with is in so many religious paths, religious practices and belief systems and institutions are these ideas that restrict even women or those bodies that are marked as female from having any kind of access to the divine and always being sort of a secondary and supporting role to the masculine that is represented by the divine. If we think about images of the divine in so many locations, those that are most highly valued are marked as male, are conceptualized as being male, not as being gender neutral, but as being sort of that given, and that given has always been male. The standard for medicine, where bodies are concerned, has been male. That's how we examine disease. It's how we examine the role of medications and side effects. And the given and the standard has always been male, and the same is true when we're thinking about religion. It's so that when we think about usually sort of the top dog, if you will, that deity is typically conceived of as being male. And it's something that we often do without even thinking about it. We're not consciously imagining, okay, he'll have a beard and he'll look like this and he'll be white. It's an unconscious thing that happens because so many of our belief systems and our institutions, our social institutions, have this woven right in from the very beginning, so that it's not something that we're required to think about. It requires no effort on our part. And social institutions that are not, they don't exist outside of the social, right? Social bodies reflect our ideals, are shaped by our ideals, and also shape and reflect our ideals. Both of those things, right? They're shaped by and also do the shaping. So we think about, again, women and how women have often operated in sort of mainstream religious belief systems, women don't have direct access to the divine, right? We often require that male intermediary to get there, or an intermediary to work on our behalf to get to that male deity, right? Somehow, we can't have that by ourselves. And not only can we not have it because we are female, but also because female bodies have typically been the receptacles of sexuality, right? The sex that is sort of really associated with base, with being base, and with the carnal and the appetites that we seek to control through various and sundry religious practices. So, and Eve, right? Eve fell, and why? Because she was tempted. And that whole idea of temptation is also something that has been conceptualized as residing in that female sexed body, right? That container of all of these things that need controlling, that represent our lesser selves, that are not linked with the divine. So, we have then these social bodies that have evolved over time, and practices differ, like location to location and across historical periods and all of those things across belief systems. But one of the things that's really, really common in many, many, many locations that we know of is that we have practices and rituals and ways of operating that really do restrict women's access to power in all kinds of ways, religious or otherwise, that require women's subordination because of this out of control nature of this sexed carnal body, right? That needs controlling. Because when it wasn't controlled, look what happened. Eve tempted Adam and they fell. And there are variations of that sort of story that kick around, but at the root of it, that's an easy way to kind of put this all together, right? And so that if a woman's body, if a female body, that sex body is left to its own devices, what's it going to do? It bleeds on its own every single month and doesn't die, right? It's this like crazy phenomenon. And so our belief systems and our practices have always sought to kind of control that, because it is this chaotic, out of control thing that's like kind of dirty, and it requires subordination. It needs to be controlled, just in lots of ways. As Mother Nature, we have sought to control her as well, and to control her forces, and manage her wild. So I think when we think about things like dress codes in our schools, this all is something that becomes linked, right? Because it's the same thought. Well, it sort of changes form and maybe mutates a little bit as we go from one historical period to the next, and end up here where we are in the present day, where we are policing what little girls are wearing to school. And by little girls, I mean kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, where they can't have a sundress on that has a spaghetti strap, right? Because their shoulders are a problem. These are all manifestations, and people think, oh, what's the big deal, blah, blah. But they're all manifestations of this same idea that somehow it's this body that is problematic, and somehow this body becomes responsible for any number of things that happen to it and that happen around it. So that in school, if a girl is wearing shorts and a tank top, the common conversation in the last years has been that it's distracting. And in high schools, the conversation is not only is it distracting for the boys, but it's also distracting for the teachers, right? Yoga pants are a no-go in lots of high schools. And this seems like a bit of a leap, but really what we're talking about is that same female body that is responsible and chaotic and requiring of external controls in order to not unleash all of the chaos that has been put upon it, right? That's not a given. There's nothing, about an actual body that is female, marked, by gender and in terms of the social, and also in terms of the sex, whichever one you want to. And there's this discussion about which comes first, but whichever lens you want to take, the problem is this female body, and that's in terms of like a social construct and an idea. But it's also true in terms of very concrete female bodies that people inhabit today, that are walking around beside you, and our kids that are, going to school. These are real bodies that have had inscribed upon them all of these same notions, and that carry the very real consequences often. I think about this dress control, cheapers, the controlling of the way that little girls dress. Sorry, I was looking for a word there and I couldn't get it. I think that it's so disturbing to me, and it is such a big deal for so many reasons, but one of which is, and maybe this is the root of it, is that a little girl learns from the time that she's small that there's a problem with her already because she's in a female body, and that's not okay. And other people are going to tell her how to use it, how to dress it, what to do with it, because she can't really be trusted to be in charge of it herself, right? Because it's a problematic body. And I think I would feel the same if it was boys, by the way, that we're getting this notion. I have 2 little boys, right? I don't ever want them to think that there's something just inherently terribly the matter with them before they've even had a chance to get out in the world and make any mistakes, right? So this is not an issue for me in terms of whether we're talking about boys or girls. It's a really problematic issue because I think it teaches us some really terrible lessons. Not only little girls learning that their bodies are problematic and that how others perceive their bodies is their fault, right? But little boys are also learning this terrible, terrible lesson about what female bodies are for, and that it's okay to objectify them, and that female bodies are also responsible for their own reactions to them. And in an era where we have Harvey Weinstein and the leader of the free world who's been accused of sexual assault and sexual misconduct on numerous occasions, and where we have men in power who know that those bodies they're assaulting are less likely to be of value, how do we consider ourselves evolved human beings, and how do we change what this narrative looks like if we're already at this kindergarten and grade 1 sort of school age level going to teach our kids that you are responsible for how all of your peers learn and react to you because you're in a female body. So also the things that happen to you in that body are likely to be your fault because that body is the problem. And for a little boy, you bear no responsibility. And the things you do are not your fault because these problematic bodies are tempting you. It's their fault. That's what it's about. It's not about your ability to be a fully functioning human being who can make choices. That's not a lesson I want my kids to learn at all, ever, for lots of different reasons. I grew up as a little girl, right, in a little girl's body, and I got the lesson that, the boys I hung out with were allowed to stay at the rink later than I could. I had to go home from playing hockey, and that's because I was a girl child, not because I was a child. Little boys got to stay out, and that's because they were boy children, and I knew it even then, and it made me furious that being in this body meant that I was somehow at risk, and not because of anything that I was going to do, but because this body somehow made me vulnerable. And that still infuriates me. When I think of all of the conversations that have been had across, in particular, North America in the last few years around sexual assault, not only just the Me Too movement, but in Canada we had the Jian Ghomeshi production. And, when he was accused of sexual assault and sexual violence and these kinds of things, and they went to trial, the judge's rendering was all about the character of the accused, so that they contacted each other, that they went back for more than one date with him, that if it was really a problem what happened, like, why would they do that, and can we trust them to know what actually happened to them and to talk about their experiences in a way that is real? Do they even know what they experienced? Are they looking back at their experiences now and telling a different story than what really happened? We never talked about what he did, and his lawyer never had to say he didn't do it, because that wasn't the point. Those female bodies were somehow responsible and not to be trusted. And maybe, just maybe, They went back because they liked it. Maybe, just maybe, he did it because of something they did or they said. And so we see these things playing out all of the time. And underneath it is sort of the meat of your lecture, which is how we think about bodies. And which bodies are the containers of what kind of value. And those bodies that are marked female are the containers for all of these things that make human beings really uncomfortable, right? So sexuality and being really intimately sort of through our biological sort of physiological processes linked to nature that has, despite humankind's attempt to control it, has been uncontrollable and chaotic. And we see that with climate change and the hurricanes and the, tsunamis and all of these things. And a female body is very much considered the same way. And so it's this object of sort of almost hatred, right? Disdain is something that makes people really uncomfortable because we can't control it, although we try very hard. And the result is that women don't have the same, girls don't have the same access to resources, to power, to opportunity, and do live as second-class citizens in most locations that we know across the world and are more vulnerable to violence. And so there's not a big leap between the really sort of theoretical foundation of your lecture and the things that I just talked about, right? One is the manifestation of the other. And I think, when we think about theory and these ideologies, it's easy to sometimes lose sight of how they operate in the real world. But the things that I just have been talking about are the exact consequences. They're the direct consequences. It's a material reality of those bodies that are marked as female and feminine. And there's a real vulnerability to harm. And there's real restriction and subordination under a system that conceives of bodies in these ways. And that is most places that we know of. Female bodies are very rarely marked as positive. They very rarely are associated with the mind and with the divine. It's just not how most societies operate, and that's because most locations that we know of are patriarchal or live under, a masculine hegemony. And so that's not to say that male bodies can't be at risk and aren't at risk sometimes and don't experience that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying theoretically, these are the foundations of our social institutions and our most belief systems, and we see it play out in a very real and concrete way. And like I said at the beginning, kind of if I'm thinking about the dress code issue in schools, some people might say that this dress code isn't a big deal and kids need to learn how to dress and how to operate in public, and you can't wear this or you can't wear that. But certainly when I went to school in the 80s, I wore like velour rompers. Okay, so cute. And almost all of them were strapless. And as far as I know, all of the boys I went to school with in elementary school and in high school actually have managed to be fully functioning human beings, right? So we have taken this narrative and just run it all the way to this place in the present day where little girls' bodies now are problematic in a way that we used to reserve for just sort of older female bodies. And I think it does all of us a real disservice because it sets up a system in which certain kinds of violence are expected, they're normative, and the practices that enact this kind of violence become the responsibility of those bodies that experience the violence rather than those bodies that perpetrate the violence. And I think most of us could agree when we look around our world and at least around our own families and our own communities, that's not a place that I am comfortable with. And so I think it's really important to be able to recognize how, like, the value of theories like, Joan Scott and Judith Butler and Elizabeth Groves and Stevie Jackson. There's all of these people who are thinking about bodies in all of these ways and trying to connect the dots and really dig underneath what's sort of been taken as a given in our social institutions and in our religious, sort of belief systems. And say, like, what are the consequences? What does this actually look like? I mean, I would argue that what it actually looks like is not being believed when there's been a sexual assault because you were wearing this, because you are a female, because if you got drunk, what did you expect? If you, went back because you were scared, if you didn't go to the police because you were scared, if this was someone you trusted and so you continued a relationship for a little while because you were scared and because you were confused and because You've spent an entire lifetime knowing that your body is the problem. And it takes you some time to sort that out. Then that is how we get from the theory and the ideology to its like lived consequences in those bodies that have less power today. And when someone doesn't believe that there's been an assault on a female body, that in and of itself is the proof in the pudding of just how ingrained these ideas about bodies are, and how access to power, is often mediated by bodies, and how gender has operated, how gender and sex have operated in terms of those things marked female, feminine, and those things marked masculine and male. The imbalance of power is that the female is not believed. Why did you go there? Why did you wear that? Why did you drink that? Instead of, why would you do that? Right? Instead of, she was passed out. Why would you do that? That's not the question. Or at least it hasn't been the question until recently. I think we're moving forward a little bit, I think, on that front, but that's sort of neither here nor there for this conversation. The conversation really is about how we get from the theory to the practice, and the practice is that you can be assaulted and no one will believe you, that a 7-year-old girl can't wear, a sundress like this one because her shoulders are going to distract and create an environment which the boys can't learn. And so there's value in these theories, I think, for the world that we're living in and the lives that we live on a regular basis. It's a matter of sort of connecting the dots. So that's it. I wanted to just kind of, really try to ground the theory in some real life examples that maybe could help you to, get those theories to make a little bit of concrete sense instead of just kind of in the abstract. I'm going through the emails. I, again, encourage you to read the assignment and really try to just follow it. It's all laid out for you right there. In terms of format, once again, I don't actually care what kind of format you use. Use MLA, use APA. However you want to write your paper is fine by me. Just be consistent. I want you to, be comfortable. We all come from sort of different backgrounds, and so use whatever you're comfortable with. Continue to email me if you have questions, and just know that I'm going through. I just got back super late last night. It was late getting to work this morning because we came in so late, and I was so tired. So I had a super great time, and the concerts were epic, and Weekly Graces is amazing. So thanks for your patience while I was gone. It was absolutely a bucket list trip for me, so I appreciate everybody's patience and sort of not sweating me while I was gone. But get your assignments in, on Thursday. I'm going to start going through them as soon as they start rolling in. And if, like I said, if you have questions, continue to get a hold of me. Just try to really make sure that you're going over the assignment instructions in detail, and that you're watching these videos so that you have a bit of a solid grasp, because I'll try to talk about every assignment just before they're due in each video that I post, so that we're sort of staying on track. Okay, have a super good week, and I will see you guys next week in video 3. Okay, take it easy.